This is the Raptors Postcast, your instant game reaction for the Toronto Raptors. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to this episode of the Raptors Postcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network, coming to you every day. And we are coming to you live after the Raptors' 112-95 loss against the New York Knicks. The Knicks popped off an MSG and swept the season series 5-0 against the Raptors. That is the third straight season the Knicks have swept the Raptors in the season series, and that is a big woof. So we're here to talk about it on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the Locked On Podcast feed. I'm Zulfi, Sheikh, credentialed journalist covering the Raptors and the NBA for over 2 years now with outlets like Sportsnet and Raptors Republic. And now I'm one of your humble hosts of the Raptors Postcast, breaking down each and every game with you and with me. He is back, Duane Notice, a.k.a. Dino, a professional basketball player and analyst. Duane is representing Canada. He's been with the Raptors system before with the Raptors 905, and he's still hooping professionally in leagues like the CBL. And tonight's show, we're going to talk about how the Raptors were basically on autopilot for much of this game, break down the impact or lack thereof from Scottie Barnes and Brandon Ingram, get some thoughts from our resident pro with the segment we like to call Take Notice, and then we'll wrap things up by handing out our player of the game. But like always, we're going to start with our initial impressions from tonight.
This is what you'll be talking about.
Well, Duane, I'm just going to start by asking what I'm thinking. Were the Raptors mentally checked out of this game before it even started? And I'm asking that because, look, it was the second night of a back-to-back. It's against a Knicks team that has, quite frankly, owned you for some time now. This was the Raptors' 13th consecutive loss to New York. No IQ and CMB coming into this game. And then we find out RJ Barrett is a late scratch as well because of knee soreness. So it felt evident to me almost immediately that the Raptors were kind of just going through the motions in this one. It was a lethargic start. The Knicks opened this game and they had an early 12-0 run where the Raptors couldn't buy a bucket. They had multiple droughts where they couldn't score points. I think they had 2 4-minute droughts. The Knicks dominated inside the paint. They had 58 paint points, which was plus 18. Raptors were sloppy all game, 18 turnovers for 27 points the other way. And that basically killed whatever little momentum they had in the third. They had cut the lead down for a little bit, but then a couple turnovers, and all of a sudden the Knicks are back up big. They had 6 turnovers all of yesterday, by the way, against the Heat. 6 turnovers that whole game. They had 6 turnovers in just the second quarter. The second quarter, by the way, they only scored 15 points in. So to me, Duane, it really did feel like the Raps were kind of just hoping to stay healthy in this game, get to Sunday, and then take care of business against the Nets to lock up a playoff spot. Like, am I wrong in saying that? That's how it felt to me.
No, I definitely felt that way. I mean, we have eyes. We could see it. The proof was in the pudding. Just playing in MSG under the bright lights, the Raptors did not perform tonight. And it seemed like the Knicks were always one step ahead of them in both sides of the ball. It was like a double-edged sword because not only were the Raptors defense giving up so many points, but then they were unable to score. You mentioned the droughts where they're moving the ball, but it just felt like they didn't really have a true sense of pace on offense, and it felt like the Knicks were always dictating the momentum for the game. And then when it came to defense, I mean, I've never seen so many straight line drives in my life. You talk about a guy like Karl Anthony Towns who opened up a game with a 3-ball and then a rip drive pass. Jakob put him straight to the basket, unimpeded with no help to dunk the ball. And this is Cat we're talking about. This is not, one of those big men who are always making a living down there in the paint. So the fact that the fact that the Knicks dominated in the paint area just showed me again the Raptors being the less physical team and just being a step behind. It was unfortunate to see because you want to see them capitalize on the road, especially against a team that's kind of had their number for the past better part of the times they've matched up. But again, the Raptors wanting to build momentum going towards the playoff. This is not the way to do it. You mentioned some of the players that were not available, but again, you still had the main guys and they should have stepped up. So it was tough to see the Raptors go down in defeat like this, but there were some positives. Like I like the way that, Walters was playing again. I just think he's being phenomenal. His confidence is showing. And then Mamu, I thought, was the guy who really brought the energy and that spark when the Raptors just felt dead out there.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll talk more about Jacoby and Mamu as we go on with this episode. But you mentioned the playoffs, and as a reminder, with the loss and then the Hawks winning tonight, Atlanta locks up the 5th seed in the Eastern Conference. So the Raptors basically fall back into 6th, and they need to beat the Nets on Sunday to avoid the play. Now, I think there are other scenarios where even if they lose, they could still get into the playoffs based on what the other matchups are with Orlando and Philadelphia. But at the end of the day, if they beat the Nets, they get that 6th seed. That's the simple explanation of it all. But going back to tonight and kind of what we were talking about, it did really feel like the Knicks were simply the better team tonight. And it goes without saying that the impact or lack thereof from Scottie Barnes and Brandon Ingram, to me, felt like a big reason reason why. The Raptors' leading scorers in this game were the guys you mentioned, Mamu and Jacoby, with 17 and 15 points each. So I wanted to kind of highlight the quiet games from the leader and how that ended up really kind of turning the tides in this game in favor of New York, if you want to say it that way.
Uh-oh, somebody messed up, and it's time to let them know with who fudged up.
So, Duane, for me, like, you look at the box score numbers, like Scottie, 15 points, 6 of 13, 3 rebounds, which is probably pretty low for Scottie, 5 assists, 2 turnovers, he's minus 10. Ingram, 16 points, 8 of 15, not terribly inefficient or anything, 6 assists, 4 rebounds, minus 9. Doesn't look all that bad, but to me, why I felt like they didn't necessarily have an impact is because of just the way they went about their play tonight. For Brandon Ingram, that last game against Miami, we praised him, not just because he had 38 points, but because he was so aggressive in that game, getting downhill, attacking as much as possible, getting to the line aggressively. Tonight felt like the polar opposite to me, Duane, because the very first play of this game I felt was indicative of that. He gets the ball around the right elbow area, his dribble gets killed, and he just holds, he waits, and then instead of kicking it out or making another decision, he basically tries to attempt a standstill jumper over OG Anunoby, and it gets blocked right away. And it felt like that was his night tonight. He was just kind of taking whatever middies came his way, and if they fell, great. If not, then whatever, it's fine. We're just going to go through this game. Again, it felt like he was going through the motions. And Scottie Barnes, it was a bit similar where, like, was he there tonight? Like, I don't say that as a joke. Like, this was maybe the least I've noticed Scottie in a game. He basically had that and one to start the fourth quarter, and that was really the only play I remember from Scottie Barnes in this game. It didn't feel entirely memorable or disruptive from him on either end. Like, look at a guy like Cat. This dude is so foul-prone defensively, and we've seen him get in trouble before. It didn't seem like a BI or Scottie were really doing anything to try to make Cat defend you or put any pressure on him. And, like, to be fair, I'll throw in Jakob Poeltl in there too, because he just was not able to keep up in this matchup at all. 4 points, 3 rebounds, and a minus 14 for him. It's a really rough night for Yak. But, like, to me, I was just incredibly disappointed in Scottie and BI. Again, you can say that they already moved on to thinking about Brooklyn. But if you potentially see this Knicks teams in the playoff, like, this doesn't really give me much confidence of what they're going to accomplish against them.
Yeah, it really doesn't. But we talked about that switch, right? And not every player has that killer mentality where they're able to just be dominant every single game. So when you come to be a star player on these teams, you have to work it in there and you have to build it up. So again, we talk about Scottie in a couple games ago where it's like, where's that aggression? And that's the layover of it right here. You want to be able to build that into a consistent mentality so that when you play teams like the Knicks or these teams that are on the better half of the league, you're able to show up. But we just saw absence tonight from both of them. I think a guy like BI was just giving into the defense, submitting too much into the one-on-one help. He picked up his dribble too many times, and they did a great job of walling him up and preventing him from using his pivots. And he seemed like he was clueless out there and didn't have the answers to the test. Then a guy like Scottie, you mentioned it, but I feel like he was settling again, even in the first quarter, going back to those corner threes. Before he takes any 3-pointers, I would love to see him, work his way in transition, work his way out of the point forward position and just get towards the basket. You talk about a guy like Cat. Yeah, he's 7 feet, but he's one of the, worst defenders when it comes to moving his feet laterally and putting guys on the free throw line. So for the Raptors not to establish themselves there, it felt really tough. And the main guys as the catalyst as being the offensive juggernauts not showing up really does hurt, because when you're playing under the bright lights, like I said, you have to bring it every single night. So for them, they have to find some more consistency, whether it's working together or working off each other. But again, that offense just sounded and felt like it was very absent because they felt nonchalant. They felt too cool. They felt like it was a game that they didn't need to win. And the Knicks felt like they were the ones that really wanted this game, and it showed in the score sheet.
Yeah, you would have thought, like, Jalen Brunson, 29 points, 12 of 18 shooting, 2 steals. Cat, 22 points, 8 of 12, 10 rebounds, 5 assists. He was a plus 11, and we'll talk more about them on Take Notice, but, like, you would have thought they were the team that was trying to clinch a playoff spot still. No, this is a team that is already locked into a top, I think they're third right now. I guess mathematically they could potentially drop into fourth, but I think they're probably going to keep that third seed if I had to guess. But, like, you think they're the ones who are desperate to get into the playoffs right now with the way their leaders stepped up for them. So it was it was disappointing from Scottie Barnes and Brandon Ingram. But again, we've seen them go through those ups and downs, and you talk about it. Your leaders kind of flipping that switch. They didn't have it tonight. But like I said, Jalen Brunson and Cat had it tonight. They were awesome in this game, and there's a chance the Raptors see them again in the playoffs. So I am excited to see what you have to say about those guys tonight, what they accomplished, and maybe what the Raptors need to do to try to stop them. And we're going to talk about that as we continue this episode of the Raptors Postcast on the other side of this. So stay tuned. All right, this episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Financial stress is something a lot of people are carrying right now. And it's not just about the numbers, it can affect your sleep, your relationships, and your overall mental health in ways that build up over time. And the reality is, struggling with money doesn't mean you failed. Sometimes it just means you haven't had the right kind of support. It's something I've thought about quite a bit, how easy it is to put pressure on yourself financially without really talking about it. I've been burdened by financial debt, I'll be honest about that. And it wasn't until I spoke to someone about it that I was able to finally get control of my situation. There's real stress that comes with you trying to figure it out on your own, the expectations you feel to have everything together, and how that pressure can spill into other areas of your life. And therapy isn't just about financial advice. It's about working through stress, anxiety, and the emotions within it. And with over 30,000 licensed therapists and more than 6 million people served, BetterHelp makes it easier to get matched and start focusing on what you need. So when life feels overwhelming, therapy can help. Sign up today and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/lockedonnba. That's BETTERHELP.com/lockedonnba. This episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are here, where every possession matters, every matchup is magnified, and every game can swing a series. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a great way to get in on the action, and here's what I like about it. You can bet just $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. That makes it easy to follow the action with player stats, trends, and matchups all in one place. And during the playoffs, that extra insight really matters. FanDuel just makes the entire playoff experience more engaging from start to finish. So head to FanDuel.com to get started. It's FanDuel, play your game. And last week's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. The playoff push is heating up and tournament hoops are here. And there's no better way to get in on the high-flying action than Prize Picks, America's #1 sports picks app. Every bucket, every assist, every big moment means that you're building lineups means more when you're building lineups on Prize Picks. It's simple to play. It's daily fantasy built around player projections, so you can stay locked into every game. And here's what I like. You can just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, which makes it quick and easy to jump in. You can even mix different sports in the same lineup, whether that's basketball, baseball, hockey, and more. There's even features like early payouts. So it lets you lock in a win early if you have a player that gets off to a hot start. So download Prize Picks today. Use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDON to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup with Prize Picks. All right, as we continue this episode of the Raptors Postcast, be sure to check out Sean Woodley with Locked On Raptors in the morning for more in-depth analysis of the Raptors' 112-95 loss to the New York Knicks. And now I hand things over to Duane Notice for a segment we like to call Take Notice.
Yeah, it's a nice take notice. See, is Brunson and Cat doing damage? They were the stars tonight, and they showed why. A guy like Karl-Anthony Towns set the tone for the game. I talked about those quick 5 buckets before Dario had to call a timeout, but he felt like he was just getting his way out there and having his way. Whoever was in front of him, he was going downhill, making shots. And at the same time, you know him, he plays off of his offense. So once his offense starts going, then he gets more engaged in the defensive end, gets more rebounds, and contests more shots. And then for a guy like Brunson, his ball handling ability is just superb. The way he's able to get to his spots on the court, no matter who's guarding him, it could be a guy like Shed, and he'll still get to where he needs to go with his amazing ball handling ability to get to that mid-range area, get to his shot, use his strength. Like, he's one of the strongest guards out there. Reminds me of SGA, the way he's able to create separation and get into that floater game. But then you talk about him being able to just play off the ball and get spot-up shots as well, and that chemistry that they have with Bridges and Josh Hart, who plays like a 4-man, kind of like the Draymond Green for them, and assisting them and getting a guy like Cat and Brunson going. But they kept their foot on the pedal all games today, and that was the reason why they were constantly ahead. And I think that, again, Brunson is such a superb player because even guys like Scottie were unable to contain him, and he, was able to get left. I saw in the fourth quarter, he's getting to his spot, laying it up with no resistance. It was tough to see on a defensive standpoint for the Raptors with the lack of secondary help. And you mentioned a guy like Scottie Barnes, and we talk about him usually being a two-way player. Today, you mentioned him being absent, and I felt the same way. Like, where was he? Because there was too many times where a guy like Jordan Clarkson was getting countless floaters in the lane, or guys were going downhill and getting dunks on dunks on dunks. It just felt like there was just the least path of resistance and so many straight drives, too many times again and again with those possessions. So I think Brunson and Cat really brought it today, and they're the reason why the Knicks won. But that two-man game and the way they're able to play off each other is special. Whenever they're scoring at a high clip, the Knicks are very dangerous.
Yeah, when those guys are clicking offensively, it's hard for even the best defenses to stop them. But the Raptors obviously just weren't that tonight. I felt like Brunson, to your point, he just kind of had his fingers on the pulse of this game. When he needed to score, he scored. When he needed to get guys going by getting inside and creating advantages elsewhere, he did that as well. And I felt like, to your point, like it's so hard to speed this guy up. Like the Raptors usually have guys who can take care of business defensively and can speed guys up, make them cause turnovers, and maybe not play at the style or tempo they want. But Jalen Brunson just wasn't having that tonight. He was able to keep guys in jail with his dribble. He was able to kind of keep it moving how he wanted to and control the tempo, hitting big shots in the half court when things got muddy a little bit. And then Cat, like you said, just super active on the glass, super energetic in this game. You mentioned that 3 he hit, and then Dark got to call that really early timeout. He was like Cat was looking back at his bench, getting hype, yelling at the guys. Like, this is like 2 minutes into the game, and he's acting like he just hit a shot in the fourth quarter. Like, he was genuinely hyped for this game for whatever reason, but kudos to him. He was energetic and it helped. But kind of going off that, Duane, what I want to throw back to you as a question is like, watching this, I'm at a point where I feel like I'm ready to consider maybe starting CMB over Yak if you play the Knicks specifically in the playoffs, just because of the matchup with Cat. I felt like Jakob Poeltl was very much in his head tonight when it came to guarding Karl-Anthony Towns. And like, it felt almost like Yak was looking at it like he just knew Cat was faster and more athletic, so he had to concede in every which way. Some of the ways he attacked closeouts against Cat maybe more than he needed to, where he was trying to defend him inside, which is weird because we just commended him against Bam, where Yak was kind of moving his feet, staying with him. But in this, it just felt like he was all over the place and wasn't able to really stop Cat in any way. Whereas I think like CMB has that mobility, that switchability. Granted, he needs to be healthy because he is dealing with that thumb injury. And then now he has a neck sprain. So we'll find out what his timeline is. And hopefully he's back for Sunday's game. But I just think it's something that maybe you consider, because watching Jakob Poeltl against the Knicks, not just this game, but I guess the season or just this matchup with Cat, I feel like that's something you have to think about. But like, what do you think?
Yeah, he definitely gets attacked on the defensive end for sure. It's a mismatch by all means. So I think a guy like CMB is a great adjustment because it switches things up. You mentioned the mobility, so he's able to switch with guards, and that's a scary lineup when you have a guy like BI switching with a guy like Scottie and then switching with a guy like CMB. So it's really wreaks havoc on the defensive end in terms of the perimeter and that length of keeping guys out of the paint. And again, I can't speak to it enough, but the Knicks were living in the paint and making a home in there. But when you speak about lateral quickness, a guy like Cat is not even a guy who's going to give you multiple dribbles to get by you. He's a straight line guy. He's going to give you a pump fake, maybe a jab step, maybe a rip to the basket, and he's going to take 1 or 2 dribbles and get to his spot. Now, the thing about CMB, I spoke about it before, is that he has to continue to watch film so he's not baited into these fouls, because I feel like a guy like Brunson is going to put him on the line with his crafty dribbling abilities and his ability to pivot and kind of get his hands into the cookie jar when he gets defenders, caught lacking when they're reaching. But outside of that, if CMB does a great job of staying disciplined with his hands on defense, because a guy like Cat loves to flop and embellish calls, I think he would be a great solution to slowing down a guy like Karl-Anthony Towns. And that goes a long way, because when Cat doesn't play well offensively, he really is a problem on the defensive end. And that could be a situation where now Scottie can go back on him on the other end, and then the Raptors can have a more successful time when it comes to playing the Knicks.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. But at the end of the day, the Raptors are going to have to figure out some solutions if they face the Knicks in the playoffs, especially for Karl-Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson. But somebody who was able to give you some sense of maybe being a solution or an X factor against the Knicks in the playoffs is our player of the game. So let's talk about it.
This is the Locked On Player of the Game.
Well, Duane, truthfully, in this game, I felt like there was 2 guys who had any form of really consistent energy, which was Sandro Mamukelashvili. He had 17 points. He was pretty efficient, 5 of 9 from the field, 3 of 6 from downtown. He even had 8 rebounds and 3 assists. And then there was Jacoby Walter, 15 points, 2 rebounds, 5 of 9. He had 4 threes as well. Personally, I think I lean towards Jacoby just because Sandro did have the team high 4 turnovers and he kind of contributed there, a couple sloppy passes. And I feel like Jacoby was just, again, scrappy on both ends, trying to make an impact on both ends of the floor. He didn't necessarily shut down anyone on the Knicks per se, but I felt like he kind of did his job for the most part. And he's just been lights out shooting the ball, man. This dude is on pace right now to be the youngest Raptor ever to have a 40% or better shooting season. He'd be the 15th Raptor to do it, but also, again, the youngest. So I lean Jacoby, but what do you think?
I think it's Jacoby too. Like you talked about the activity, but him and his confidence should continue to be skyrocketing from game to game. And we talked about all of the shooting discrepancies that the Raptors have, especially from the three-point line. So when you develop a young talent like Jacoby Walters and see the consistency that he's having at 40% and higher at that clip, I mean, the sky's the limit. And now you're not really, obviously, you're still searching for other shooters. But if you can continue to develop a guy like Jacoby, I think it's going to bode well for the Raptors offense. And then again, we always speak about it, but the fact that he's able to do it on both ends, you can't teach defensive grit. You can't teach defensive intensity. And the fact that he already has that embedded in his defensive code, I think it's just the sky's the limit for his offensive game. So if the Raptors are able to still have him on the squad and continue to be a guy that can make shots from the corner specifically, but also above the break on these kickouts whenever Jakob Poeltl doesn't have a clean look at the basket, whenever Scottie draws attention, or whether a guy like BI is getting double teamed, then you have a guy like Jacoby Walters is able to space the floor and keep the defense honest. I think he's doing a great job of shooting it with confidence. Even if he's not making it, he's hustling back on defense. Like you mentioned, he wasn't able to have the best defensive game today, but I love that he's always up to the challenge and he's able to shot somehow, in some way, contain most of the players that he's guarding. So for him, just being able to pick up and establish that energy, picking up 94 feet, I think it does a lot for the Raptors. So you have to give him the player of the game because recently he's really been bringing it. And man, I'm loving the development and the process and the progress of a guy like Jacoby Walter.
Yeah, I think that's very well said, Duane. And for me, the most fun part has been like the diversity of shots he's taking within this. He's not just taking the same kinds of threes. It's in transition. It's standstill. It's that one dribble pump fake type of three. It's late in the shot clock situation threes, above the break, like you mentioned, coming off like pin downs and whatnot, on movement stuff as well. So like he's just adding different variations of shots and he's just taking them all with the same confidence. And that's been a lot of fun to see. And like, it's just like I'm super excited about hopefully the Raptors making the playoffs. I can see what he can do in a bench role. I think like he is the personification of an X factor, like where this guy can give you like a really hot night where again he shoots 4 of 7 from downtown, but then he also gets going like defensively as well in a really key matchup, and all of a sudden that swings a quarter for the Raptors. And I think he's absolutely capable of that. And so is a guy like Colin Murray-Boyles, who is going to be important for the Raptors off the bench if he's healthy as well. But tonight, Jacoby Walter, I did honestly think he was their best player in this game, at least their most energetic and their most consistent in terms of giving effort in this game. So for that, again, he deserves your player of the game. But just to wrap things up, I want to say, like, again, we know there was a lot of external circumstances tonight with seeding scenarios, guys trying to figure out where they wanted to end up in the standings. There's also injuries. But if the Knicks are who the Raptors end up seeing in the first round, if they can secure a playoff spot Sunday, that is, then boy, Darko and his team need to start figuring out some solutions and have some work to do, because right now it seems like they don't have very many. And quite honestly, they haven't really had any solutions for the Knicks for the last 2 seasons. The Raptors haven't beat the Knicks since January 2023, 13 straight losses. That goes pretty far back. So hopefully we can see them figure it out if they do match up in the playoffs. But until then, that does it for us. For myself, Zulfi, Sheikh, and Duane Notice, thank you to everyone who tuned in live, and for those listening the morning after. If you haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe to Locked On Raptors on all platforms. And don't forget to comment below if you have any thoughts. We'll be back on Sunday live after the Raptors host the Brooklyn Nets for their regular season finale. And again, if the Raptors win, they are in. They get a playoff spot. They return for the first time since 2022. So we will see you then, breaking it all down on the Raptors Postcast. Peace.